The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
So this afternoon's session deals with one of the other issues we wanted to take a deeper dive into. So we looked at big picture and then we're diving down into a couple of these issues. So this afternoon it is trade. And trade and tariffs, we should say. So what did Dave Wheelock, in his very first video that we saw this morning, what did he say about Smoot-Hawley tariffs? What was their impact on the Great Depression?
It wasn't good. I mean, I have my notes. I don't know.
Other countries increased their.
That's right.
Okay, other countries increased their tariffs, so retaliatory type things, okay. What about in terms of causation? Was it a cause of the Great Depression? So what he said was it was a contributor, but it was not a cause. A contributor, but not a cause. So it was significant, but I think that there's some key things, Maria, that you wanted to point out about that time frame too, right?
Sure. So again, a reminder, and it's especially important to think about your students and where they are with things. I mean, if you think about where we are with our students at this point, you now have students that don't remember 9/11. So we're asking kids to refer back to 1913, which most of them don't even have great-grandparents that are alive from that time period anymore. So, you know, the whole idea of free trade and all this global trade and all this stuff that you get in the stores and whatnot, remember that markets were so much smaller. Global markets were smaller, and even like the local markets were smaller. You know, you went to the local mercantile, even back in the early 1900s, that was still a reality. So it was a limited amount of goods that were available, and certainly we were not a services country. If you'll think about it, the Dow Jones Industrial Average at that point was 11 stocks, and it was things like coal and iron and sugar and tobacco and leather and train companies. And now our Dow Jones Industrial Average, which reflects our market, is Boeing and lots of banks and services. Disney, Coca-Cola, McDonald's have all been in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Again, that we use as a reflection of our market and our market activity as to what we produce. So lots of service-oriented companies now, and we just didn't have that back then. So we were a much more closed economy. So yes, tariffs had an impact, especially for those people that were using the product that had the tariff imposed on it. But just like the Dust Bowl, it wasn't necessarily a huge impact all the way down to the local community. As I think about all of this, I think about the idea that every time we have an economic contraction, whether it be the Great Depression or the Great Recession, I've recently moved to a smaller community than where I had been living, a community much like where I grew up. And, you know, we call it jokingly going to ground. So when things get bad, can you retreat to ground? What can you do? So we're on 6 acres and all of our neighbors have 6 acres. So how much food can we grow? And my fabric stash alone is going to keep us in clothes. So you know that budget, that clothes thing? Now, it may be cute little prints with ragdoll imprints or something on it, but you know, I can keep you clothes. But that whole closed economy, and we tend to retreat to ground as things happen. So again, that Smoot-Hawley tariff had some big political implications in my mind, but maybe not necessarily as big of a GDP impact as you might think it had.
And I think there's always that nice connection between then and some real life things that are happening now, right? Some current events. But what we're going to do during this segment is we're going to be focusing on this essential question up here about why do nations trade, okay? And so what we're going to do is we need to number off first, and I need you to remember your number, Okay, so let's start over here.
1, 2,
3, 5,
6,
7,
9,
10,
11,
14.
If you need to write down your number, right? I would have to. Okay. Now, Maria is going to give you instructions. And so the first thing we need to tell them is don't look in the bag, okay? Right? Is that the most important instruction
Absolutely.
right now? Okay.
So everybody come and get a bag. It's random items in the bag, so you have no clue. So get it, take it back to your table, and then we'll give you more instructions. And if you want to pick up the bag for everybody at your table, too late. I've already got you all started. Donna, a bag that has to have 2 bags has got to be a good bag, right? I know what's in there. It's a good bag.
As an archivist, I learned never to charge the bag.
That's a good way to think of it. Okay, so 2 or 3 of you have been in workshops with us before where we've done this. So play along and pretend like you've never seen it. So I want you to look in your bag, but do not show the people around you what's in your bag. So keep it hidden from everybody the best you can. Look in your bag, and then I want you to give your bag, your item, a ranking in terms of utility. And utility, remember, we don't talk about it a whole lot more in economics, which I think is a shame, but utility is a level of satisfaction you get from something. So how happy does the item in your bag make you at this point in time in your life? So give it a score of 1 to 10.
1 being
The lowest. So 1 means, why did I grab that bag? And 10 means I could not be happier in my life if I, okay? So everybody give it a number. And then we're going to go through, and the reason Jackie asked you to number off is she likes to do it the high-tech way and enter it into Excel to add up all your numbers. I do it in front of my class on the board. Do you all know that college freshmen all the way to seniors are impressed when you add 30 numbers without a calculator in your head? Because, you know, you go to school all those years and you add single-digit numbers and they're really impressed. Daniel's giving me that. Seriously, true story. No.
Yeah.
Those life skills. Okay, so.
And again, 1 is?
1 is, what in the heck is this? And 10 is, I love it to death. Okay? So we'll go through the room. So as you numbered off, just tell Jackie your score.
6.
9.
2,
Oh, I want your bag.
What's that? 8, okay.
3. 4.
I'm just going to tell you, I stuffed the bags and I didn't see anything that was a 10, but we're all in different places in our lives. So in this next round, I want you at your table to show the people at your table what you've got and decide if you might want to trade or not.
At your table.
At your table. It's okay if you don't trade.
And you can take them out of the bag at this point if you want to. So yeah, at this point you can take it out of the bag.
Okay, so if you do not have to trade, absolutely not. So whether you trade it or not, you need to look at your item and decide your level of utility now. So maybe if you saw somebody else has, you know, the $10 bill that was in a bag, then all of a sudden you're not feeling so good about your item, but you might feel even better. So again, rate your item based on utility after your exchange you just made at the table. Okay? And then we'll go around the room and again give Jackie your score. It's okay if it's the same, it's okay if it's different, it's okay if it's lower.
I might do an 8.
7.
Okay. So in the interest of time, if I were doing this in my classroom, I'd put 2 tables together, 3 tables together, and we go with a smaller group. But in the interest of time, we're going to give you like 15 seconds apiece to market your item to the room, and then we will have a big trade session. So hold up your item. You got a 15-second elevator spiel. So we'll start with Joyce and go around the room.
Okay, I've got three pack of composition little books that I can keep notes in that come in very useful for older people that tend to lose their memory like I'm doing. So they're very useful and handy to have around.
Okay.
All right, I have some mini spinning pop. The neat thing about this is it's a lollipop, it's a ring, and it's a spinner. So for those of you who are fidgeters and you have a sweet tooth, you get a lot of bang in it. So there you go.
Okay.
I have some very tasty s'mores, Girl Scout s'mores that only expired on Wednesday. And they're very good.
Are you like my husband? You're a freak about expiration
No.
dates. In my house, if he'd seen those, they'd have gone in the trash can.
I'd eat them. I'd eat them.
I have glue. That's all I can say about that.
She is not a marketing teacher, clearly.
I've got a card game, 2 to 6 players, Pass the Ugly Sweater. It'd be great for Christmas, have Christmas around all year, and a good game to play with the kids.
Jackie and I decided that that is the new alternative to Old Maids. So instead of getting rid of the Old Maid, you're getting rid of, this is now the politically correct version, you're getting rid of the ugly sweater.
I've got Beat the Heat with kid-friendly activities for June, July, and August. Get a jump on next summer and be ready to beat the heat with some exciting activities for enjoyment.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited because I burn candles all the time from Yankee Candle, and here I got a free one, and it looks about the same size, a little bigger than the ones that cost $10 at Yankee Candle. So there you go. And it smells good too. And it lasts 25 hours, it says.
I have this nice, sturdy, durable little shovel, just in time for planting your fall flowers. It's lovely. Nice little handle.
I like the handle.
It's a nice little handle. It's pretty sturdy.
The newest thing from Ronco, the micro kite, with a beautiful P-51 Mustang on the cover.
I can't follow that. I have 3 notepads for those people that are list people, like myself, who like to write it down just to check it off their list. They come in nice little floral prints to make you, anxious for spring.
I have a Spider-Man 7-piece bubble set. Those with like blowing bubbles and Spider-Man.
I hold in my hands a piece of history. For those of you who do not know what these are bendy straws, plastic, a limited time only.
I have a pair of pretty color green candle holders. You can use them, in the house to decorate a room or something and spruce up your candles. Or you can even put them in your emergency preparedness kit to spruce up your kit.
For all you fashionistas who want to be patriotic, I have sunglasses for your summer wear.
America out.
All right. So some great marketing going on. So everybody get up and come up here. And then we're going to take, yes, with your product. And we're going to take 4 minutes and trade.
But you don't have to trade if you don't want to, but you can try to negotiate your trades. Okay, so go ahead and start negotiations.
You got to work on
Yeah. Now we'll let y'all can start any time with, come on up and start the negotiations.
Okay, let's all go back to our seats if you've completed your negotiations. And again, on a scale of 1 to 10, rate your level of utility with your item.
So Joyce, we're ready. How about we'll get started?
Yeah, I think I'm at a 9 now.
9. And did you trade or
No,
you kept yours? Okay.
No, I kept mine.
I traded my item.
And what's your number now?
For that item I traded?
No, for what you have now.
It's a 10 because I'm a teacher and, you know, I have elementary kids sometimes.
There you go.
I have a 7-year-old daughter.
We'll go with a 6.
Okay.
I traded, yeah.
Still a 2.
What was yours? I'm sorry.
6.
6 now.
Oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
no.
You were a 2.
I'm a 6.
He's 6. She's a 2.
6
Uh, I'm up to an 8 now.
8 now. Very.
Okay.
Oh, I am 7.
And 10.
So I didn't trade, so I guess I'm going to be a 10.
5.
I'm still a 10.
Still an 8.
8, girl power. 6.
I'm 8.
Okay. So, what do we know from the bottom numbers?
They went up. Satisfaction went up every time.
Okay, our level of utility, our level of satisfaction with what we got increased. Did everybody increase? Not necessarily, but as a whole, we saw some increase in utility, or we could also call it wealth, right? Because if we're happier, we have wealth. Because not all wealth is financial wealth, right? There's some level of social wealth, interpersonal wealth, that sort of thing. Okay? So, when you do this in your classroom, a few tips. One, sometimes people went down. Did anybody go down this last round? Or the middle round? You went down? No? Yes? Okay. Why do you go down? Why would you look at your item and then maybe have the same item the next round, but you downgraded it? Because you've seen the other options that are out there, right? So you're in your small community and these are the things that you have and you might be greatly satisfied with it. But once you've seen that over the fence the Joneses have a swimming pool, maybe you're not so happy with it. So sometimes that happens. That is, you know, just keep that in mind with your kids with your trade if you get down to the end and it didn't go up, because they didn't have complete information. And a big part of creating wealth with free trade is having complete information. And complete information is a ideal, because we never have complete information about everything, right? People always hold something back. If Eric had not revealed that the Girl Scout cookies expired yesterday, would we have ever known that?
So let's think about, as we tie this back to our essential question, why do nations trade? So what can we take away from this? Why do we say, how can we answer that question using this information?
It's based on need.
Based on need.
And resources. What
And
they can make.
resources.
It improved our utility.
Utility. Okay. What else? Maria's writing a couple of words up
Oh,
here.
yes, and now you all get to see how awful my handwriting is. My students groan when I go to the board and classroom.
So good. Well, we actually have it up here on the screen too. We have opportunity cost up there for you. So do you want to talk?
So what is opportunity cost, econ teachers? It's what you give up. It's the value of the next most valuable thing that you give up to get something. And then what is...
Let's use our chocolate example real quick. Okay, so Maria and I like to use this example using chocolate. So Holly, I want you to look in the box here and pick out what your choice is.
Choice.
Okay.
York peppermint patty.
York peppermint patty, okay. And what is your next? What's your opportunity cost? Which one would you have picked next?
I would pick a Snickers.
Okay, so do y'all see, so the opportunity cost is not everything. It's that next best option, right? That thing. So again, your choice and your opportunity cost. Okay,
Do you remember when you did this at the Hermitage and you had 3 different kinds of dove ballers? So I got to do it for my first student, but I didn't have the doves. So I got 3 little different colored paper clips. And I said, I got 3 colors, and I want you to pick out your favorite. He goes, I'm colorblind. I did blue. I was like, oh, rats. So, but it did work for another one much better.
Oh, that's great.
The best laid plans. Seemed like a good idea. So opportunity cost. So every transaction we make has an opportunity cost, right? And then comparative advantage. What is comparative advantage?
Who's the best at making something? Or who gives up the least amount to make something?
Right. So who has the lowest opportunity cost to produce something? So the this all ties together because all free trade is based on the idea of comparative advantage. All truly free trade is executed by who has the lowest opportunity cost to produce something. So I can make all of you darling clothes when we have to go to ground. Somebody else is going to need to grow the green beans. Okay? So we'd have a free exchange of trade because of the opportunity cost to make those two items.
Maria, I know one of the points you always like to make when we're doing this activity is the one thing that didn't come up during this conversation was this.
Absolutely. We never talked about what did this cost versus this cost. We talked about utility, a level of satisfaction. When I do this with my classroom, a lot of times I go to the everything's a dollar store, and I go through, the cashier thinks I'm crazy, and I pick out 30 items. They all cost what? $1. But yet we still see with students that utility increased or wealth increased because we're not talking about money. We're talking about levels of satisfaction with things. When I go through, if I go through McDonald's in the morning and I give the lady my money and she gives me my product, she says thank you because she got my money, and I say thank you because I got my product because I decided it was worth it, right? Now I may grouse about it a little bit that that was more than I wanted to pay, but at the end of the day I handed over my money, right? So I must have found some value in it. Otherwise I would have not done that. And then the last thing with this exercise is you can print yourself some fake money. There's actually some in lesson 3, a page that you can copy because you have to be careful about copying money, because Secret Service will be banging on your door. And what I do is I go through the room and hand 3 or 4 kids some money. And on some of the bags, I have a note tacked that says, you can trade this item, but you also must collect $2 or whatever it is I've given out. And then that way, you can only trade with what? Somebody that got the money, right? So it kind of shows how those tariffs restrict some free trade. The other thing you can do is you can make one country North Korea, and nobody trades with them, right? So it's just a good example of policies, however well intentioned, and how they affect that wealth growth. Okay?
All right. So what we've been showing you up here is our infographic, and I brought that infographic along, and there's some activities and lessons that go along with each of our infographics as well. So be sure to grab, we have rubber bands over there, and when we take a break, y'all can grab those and roll them up. Our plan today is we're going to go through this segment and then Great Depression versus Great Recession, and then we're going to break. Okay, we're going to kind of condense those two together so that then we can come back and do the ESP part in whole to wrap up everything up. Does that sound good for everybody? And so what time is it? What are we at right here? 1:17. Did you want to do the other, where did stuff come from?
Yes, let's do that real quick. We just do a down and dirty version of that. So some of you have seen this, and Jackie and I have tried to refine our skills with this exercise. Do you have the blue tape?
Yeah, do we want to do blue tape, or do you want them just to do it at their table there?
Let's do one and do the whole country.
Okay, and do everything goes up
do
there?
everybody,
Sure,
yeah.
I'll tape it up there while you talk.
So at your table, I want you to make a list of where everything you have with you came from. So look at your name, the tags in your clothes. The only restriction I put on students is I don't want to see any underwear. But other than that, look at all your tags, your shoes, your bags, your calculators, anything you've got with you, and make a list. And if you find a country that you think, write down what you found from that country. Okay, so 3 minutes.
Granted, this doesn't have anything on it. Surely it's somewhere though. I know my name. I don't even know where that was. Jordan.
Mexico? Wow.
Jordan.
Mexico, did you say?
No, China.
And then once you have your 5, what we want you to do is to come up here and to use the arrows and to mark, if it comes from the United States, you can mark here. If it actually says Tennessee, you can mark there, or find the country or approximate area, since some of these aren't labeled, where it comes from. Okay.
So as we're adding the last couple on there, tell me what you found. I heard lots of China. Where else?
Indonesia.
Indonesia? What was from Indonesia? Do you remember?
My purse and oh gosh, I think my purse and jacket.
Okay. Somebody else?
We had a hoodie from Vietnam.
Your what from
We had a
Vietnam?
hoodie.
Your hoodie? Okay.
No, my kids' tennis shoes were Indonesia.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mexico.
Mexico. Okay. What else?
I had a Canada,
What was out of Canada?
the keychain
Okay.
for my vehicle.
Okay.
New Jersey,
What's from New Jersey?
the spinny pod.
Well, there you go. You know, that just hit it on all the notes when I put that in that bag. I was like, beautiful jewelry, fidget spinner, candy in an emergency. What else? Let's see, what do you
Anybody
guys?
say India yet? I had a shirt from India.
Okay.
I had Jordan,
I hear. Okay. What was from Jordan?
this jacket,
Okay.
pullover.
Somebody tell me about. I see 2 stickers up here in Europe.
We had a computer from Ireland.
Got a what?
A computer from Ireland,
Okay.
oddly enough.
That is. I would not have thought of that.
I wouldn't either.
What else? Anything that just really stood out to you?
Purse from Cambodia.
Okay. So, first of all, again, why don't we make everything here? That's the argument on the news, right? We should make everything. I heard a news broadcaster a few years ago, it's on video, I show my students, and he's talking about, we don't make blue jeans in this country anymore. Well, gasp. I mean, what's our opportunity cost for making blue jeans in this country? Computers, or all the things that we provide education for. Why do we as a society provide free education for people if what our goal is for them to sit in a factory and push denim fabric through a sewing machine? Because there's a huge opportunity cost for those sorts of things. Remember, those of you that are old enough to remember Ross Perot's campaign, doesn't matter if we make computer chips or potato chips. But it does, doesn't it? At the end of the day, our GDP goes up because we make more what? Computer chips. It's a better paying job, and we use computer chips as the start of more physical capital that makes things, right? And we know as we invest in more physical capital and human capital that our GDP goes up. And GDP is, whether some people want to put it all down for it or not, is associated with growth and wealth. So you can eschew the idea of making money as having to do with wealth all day long, but when you want to put food on the table and clothes on your family's backs, making money is kind of an important part of that, isn't it? We saw that exercise 1928 to 1933, because you're giving up all this stuff just to be able to get back to the basics. Okay, so this is just a nice way to, one, stop the verbiage that they hear at home all the time. My dad, before he died, bless his heart, it was always, well, we don't make anything. We don't produce anything in this country. Well, how many of you have a job in this room? How many of you have a job? We produce something, right? What do you guys produce?
The future.
You produce the future, that's right. You produce intelligent children. I didn't say they had common sense, but you produce intelligent children. So
the other thing to remember when we're talking about GDP, again, I like to reinforce this, is when you were looking at those labels, they said one of 2 words usually, right? Either made in, fill in the blank, or assembled in, which is essentially the same thing. Because remember, that's that final point of production. So even with computers, we might be getting processor parts from here and this part from over here, but wherever that last point of assembly was, that's where it counts as the GDP for the final point of production for that.
my current textbook has an example. There's 24 countries that produce the parts that go into an iPad. So 24. But think about it, from a big business standpoint, you're going to go where, one, you get the lowest cost for production, but 2, the better quality for production.
So what I pulled up here is the organization that kind of monitors our trade and gives us an assessment of that. It's called the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And if you're really into this data stuff and want to look more at it, I know some of you get really excited about that like Maria does. I just pulled up some of the information about U.S. trade. So they have tons. You can see all the tabs down here. So you can analyze for days. But all I did to find this was I just did a Google, U.S., I just put in Bureau of Economic Analysis, international trade for U.S. And you can pull up this information. Okay. All right, so this was the part about tariffs and trade. So maybe we should pause there and do the ESP, and then we can go on to recession versus depression. Okay.
So again, we're going to think about what we just learned about trade and tariffs, the economic, social, and political ramifications of that as they relate to the causes of the Great Depression.
They don't trust the bank, so they're not putting any money there.
So one of the key things to think about too, remember. So we can think about it in terms of what caused the Great Depression, but we tied it to now as well. So be thinking about in terms of when we talked about the Smoot-Hawley tariff, okay? That maybe it was a contributor, but not the cause. And so thinking about it in that context as well.
Where's your hair from that?
Okay, everyone has had a chance to respond. So we're going to do one more session, and then we're going to come back to these and just, after we finish this next session, and start to really kind of synthesize all this. So we have one more ESP that we'll do before we kind of wrap that up for the day.
And so here what we're going to do is this is the Great Recession versus the Great Depression, because the recession is what's in our current lives. But even for your students, think about how old they are. This is 10 years ago in many cases for them, right? So, and if some of them are 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, right? All in that time age frame, that's half a lifetime ago, if not more. So, but we're going to do this piece that Dave Wheelock has that compares the two. The handout, Maria, do you want to mention the handout?
Yes, so in your packet, there is this beautiful lilac color. I was in my happy place yesterday, picking color, copy machine. And it's just to kind of follow along, kind of, as he's talking about the data, to put the two in perspective with each other.
All right, here we go.
Now, Scott asked me to talk about the Great Depression in the context of our recent experience in the recent financial crisis, and to do all of that in 1 hour. So I'll summarize the recent financial crisis with one slide. There'll be a quiz on this later, and I'm not even going to talk about it. Suffice it to say, the financial crisis was a little complicated, and it had a lot of aspects to it. We had a severe financial crisis in the 1930s as well, but it was different. It was, let me just say it's different. Now, historically, in the US as well as in other countries, recessions that follow financial crises tend to be much more severe than ordinary recessions. Financial crises, therefore, are bad. The 30s, we had a financial crisis. The 2000s, we had a financial crisis. We ended up with severe recessions afterward. It's not a coincidence. Instead of going through the nuts and bolts of the financial crises in both periods, however, let me compare instead the recent recession with the Great Depression, just in terms of the concepts of economics that we've been using up to this point: GDP, inflation, unemployment. So, for example, in the 1930, 29 was the peak of the economy. 1933, the beginning, early 1933, was the bottom and the beginnings of the recovery period. Over that period, real GDP fell by about a third, 36.2%. The unemployment rate touched over 25%, peaked out at 25%, and the price level fell by about a third, 27%. By comparison, the worst recession in US history since then, the recession of 2007 to 2009, lasted 18 months, peak to trough before the recovery. Real GDP, that is the balloon again, shrank by 5%. The maximum height of the unemployment rate reached 10% briefly for 1 month. It's been trending down, albeit slowly, since then. And the price level has been pretty stable, just a slight rate of inflation, 1.6% on average during the period of the recession. So what I've done here is drawn some charts where I've taken whatever I'm interested in this case real GDP, set that value equal to 100, whatever the value of GDP was at 100 at the beginning of the recession, and then plotted it out over time. So the Great Depression here is shown by the, blue line. It lasted. So even 20 quarters after the 1929 peak, GDP in the US was still 27% below where it had been in the third quarter of 1929, which was just at the peak of the economy before it started into the recession. By comparison, we go out a similar length of time. Today, after the beginning of the current, I don't want to say current recession, but the recession that officially lasted from December of 2007 to mid-2009, we've had the recession. We lost about 5% of GDP. Since then, we've gained it all back and then some. So as of the, I think this is through the first quarter of this year, 2013, output of goods and services are now 3% above what they were in the fourth quarter of 2007, which was the peak of the last business cycle before the recession. So again, the Great Depression lasts, and even 4 or 5 years after the peak, still hugely smaller, if that makes any sense, but a much smaller economy in terms of what's being produced than we have now. The unemployment rate, again, I've harped on this already. Here we are, in this case, 5 years after the peak. We have employment in the US economy today is 1.4% below what it was in December of 2007. We have not fully recovered the level of employment. We've surpassed it in GDP, but we're still not there yet in terms of employment in the US economy. So this is the path for employment, setting the peak at 2007 at equal to 100, and then setting the 1929 peak also at 100. You can see we lost the unemployment rate in 1932-33, about 25% of the labor force. Even 4 years after the peak, 17.5% rate of unemployment. Price level, again, a significant difference between the Depression and the recent recession was the great deflation we had during the 1930s as compared to the slight inflation we've had. The price level today is about 10% higher than it was in December of 2007, whereas in the 1930s, 5 years after the peak in 1929, prices were 22% below what they had been in 1929. And then the stock market. The stock market's fully recovered what it lost during the recession, including that big drop in 2009. It's now 5% above the peak of the stock market in the fall of 2007. Stock market performance has been much different in the last couple of years than it was after the 1929 peak, when it came down hard and just stayed flat for many, many years. So again, hopefully, by having lived through the recent experience and now seeing the views of how our economy has functioned since 2007, you can get some perspective, thinking back about what our grandparents lived through and our great-grandparents in the 1920s and 1930s, when it was much, much more severe than the recession we've just come through. Severe as it was, it doesn't compare on scale with the Great Depression.
Okay, so let's fill in some of those blanks on your sheet. So we talked about the length of the recession in months for the Great Depression versus the Great Recession. So the Great Depression was about how many months? 43. So it wasn't, quite 4 full years. Just a long 4 years. And then the Great Recession was how many months? 18. About 18, so a year and a half. So a bit of a faster recovery attributed to a lot of things. Quantitative easing, the fact that we operate in more of a global market than we have in the past, the Fed's ability to keep their work to keep consumer confidence higher, so people weren't so reluctant to go back to engaging in robust economic activity. All those things kind of led to a shorter period for what we term the Great Recession. The national output decrease, 33%, and then the Great Recession, what was that percentage about? 5%. Consumer price decrease or increase in the Great Depression was how much? About 25 to 27%. And we're talking about deflation. I'll go back to that in just a second. And then in the Great Recession, it was how much of an increase?
1.6.
About, yeah, 1 to 2%. And you know the thing, and we've alluded to it, and Dr. Wheelock's mentioned it several times, this whole notion of deflation. And when you get on that spiral, it's something you really need to emphasize to your students, that once you get on the path of deflation, getting out of it is so hard, because let's say we start with falling prices, and let's say you work at Whirlpool here in town, and the prices of refrigerators and freezers fall. What is Whirlpool's first action to shore up the stability of their country? Lay off people, because you still got to pay for the building, you still got to pay for the electricity. If you've got loans, you've got to pay that. So labor is where we always go first at a microeconomic level to shore up the financial health of an industry, whether it be on a single company level or a global company level. So now we've laid off people. The day you get a layoff notice, what are you doing? Are you buying stuff? You're not buying stuff. You're sure not buying a new refrigerator or freezer unless yours just totally dies, right? So now you're not upgrading to the new refrigerator that I heard a conversation yesterday about how they could be cyber attacked now. Completely freaked out about all the stuff in my house that could be cyber attacked after that webinar yesterday. But so you're not buying a new refrigerator. So now what does Whirlpool do?
Lays off more.
They lay off more people. Those people aren't doing what?
Buying refrigerators.
They aren't buying more refrigerators. They're not going out in the community. They're not going out to eat. They're not buying new underwear, as Dr. Greenspan said. You know, they're cutting their spending habits. So now we're going farther and farther down this deflation cycle, and it's just hard to get out of, because you've got to manage to put the brakes in the middle somewhere and get some level of consumer confidence to cause people to spend what little bit of money they still do have. And a lot of times, in terms of fiscal policy now, we've tried as a government, and a few times it's worked and a couple of times it hasn't. You know, we cut taxes, we cut personal taxes. Remember the Bush tax cut of about $2,000 that was supposed to, and everybody was supposed to go out and spend it? Well, the government spending multiplier says that would have been a great thing, right? Except what did we do?
Saved it.
We held on to it like it was the last $2,000 we were ever going to see in our lives. So we didn't spend it, so that government spending multiplier didn't get us back off of this cycle, so that we were raising our GDP level again.
And Maria, you used some terminology. She used fiscal policy.
Sorry.
Okay. So can you talk about
fiscal policy? So monetary policy comes from what agency?
Fed.
The Federal Reserve. And then fiscal policy, who makes fiscal policy?
Congress.
Congress, right. Congress and the executive
And so let's talk
office.
about those in terms of what it really means, right? It's like, so fiscal policy, the example of the taxes, right? Those sort of things that influence spending there. Things like the Fed does, what we're talking about there is what the influence that we have on the baseline interest rates and the amount of credit and money in the economy generally. Okay. All right. So we've looked at inflation and deflation. The other big thing that they talked about during the video that Dave Wheelock, and Maria and I love looking at this part, not because we like looking at high rates of unemployment, but it's just because it's really interesting. And so, do you remember what they said about unemployment again during the Great Depression? 25. And what about during the Great Recession? Okay. Remember, those are national numbers. When we're talking about these particular numbers, we're talking about national numbers. And this part that we have here, this link is in your agenda as well. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics is the organization that gathers the data related to unemployment. Okay? So the thing we need to keep in mind, and we always like to point this out, is that unemployment statistics is different than unemployment insurance statistics, gathered by the same agency, but calculated differently. So Maria, do you want to talk about how do we calculate this unemployment rate, like who is included and who's not included?
Sure. So you have to be a minimum of how old to be counted as employed or unemployed by the government? 16. So we have lots of 15-year-olds that work in our economy, but 16 is where we start counting because they're more likely to hold down a more stable level of job. And then to be counted as, let's look at it from unemployed standpoint. To be counted as employed, how many hours do you have to work a week? 1. How horrifying is that? So we look at this data, and Jackie and I do a webinar on looking at unemployment data because we look at U1 to U6, and it's all different levels of unemployment. But if you work 1 hour a week, what's going to happen to your spending ability? You don't have any, right? So you have to work 1 hour a week, or to be considered unemployed, you have to be looking for a job. Remember, that's the stipulation to be counted as unemployed, is you actually have to be looking. So if you're not looking, you're considered what kind of a worker? Initially, you're considered discouraged. So we have lots of discouraged workers. They want work, or like they might even be marginally attached. They might have looked in the last 12 months, but they haven't found a job, so they've just kind of given up. And we saw a lot of that with this Great Recession happening, especially middle-aged, middle-income workers, middle management types, because they would get laid off, and then you're overqualified for this job, and we're not hiring at your level anymore because technology took over a lot of those jobs. So unemployment levels are tricky things when you look at them, because we say, what was our number for Great Recession? 10.1%, and yet if we look at the U6 number, which includes those underemployed and marginally attached people and whatnot, we're looking at closer to 17%. So imagine if we were able to measure that in 1932, 33, how much higher that number would be in reality.
And remember, there's the key thing there. It's not all 16-year-olds, or it's not everybody who's out there.
Right.
Actively looking for work is the key part there, okay? So, Nicholas?
I was just curious, I just want your opinion. Earlier when we was watching a video, and he was talking about, how really before this time period early before the Great Depression, they would cut wages of the employees instead of laying them off. Do you think that would, if it happened today instead of that, do you think that would be better for the economy, or same or worse? How would you think if he had never went there and said, don't lower wages, and it led them laying off? They had never done that. What effect do you think it would be on the economy?
What do y'all think?
I think it's time for me to be done.
Yeah. So what do you all think? What do you think? I mean, and again, that's one of those that it is a political related kind of question too.
My undergrad's a poli-sci, I'm sorry. But it's
a good question. And so that's why I want your colleagues to respond. What do you all think?
I think it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
In terms of in terms of a nation, same effect. It's still less wages flowing into the economy for spending purposes. In terms of consumer confidence, it almost seems like to me it would be worse if we're all going to take a $2 pay cut. Because the problem is ultimately, and I think maybe this is what Daniel's alluding to, money is neutral, right? So as the wage levels raise, so do the price levels. And I think over time, if we had lowered wage levels, then price levels would have fallen with it. So you get that whole money neutrality thing kicking in over time. Is that where you were thinking with that?
That and the fact that coupled with, like if you've got an X amount of dollars coming in, you have X amount of dollars coming out, it's going to be a zero sum regardless, because you have the same amount of wages being paid. As well, once somebody tells me the economy's in trouble, we have to take a pay cut, the economy's in trouble, I'm not buying.
Right.
I'm yanking my money out of the market,
Right.
It's going to go into 30-year treasuries,
Right.
sit there,
Absolutely.
and no new car, just patch up the thing I got, and we're in trouble. Until I'm convinced that I'm fine.
Absolutely. So hopefully that helped kind of answer your question too. So, and we can talk more about that later as well. Okay. So let's take a look at this whole idea of unemployment. Remember we said that during the Great Recession, the height of the unemployment was at 10.1 as a nation. And so the Bureau of Labor Statistics has this great map. This is one of my favorite things that they have that looks at, it has the map that's here, but then you scroll down and it has by state. So it helps to disaggregate the data and look at it more and make it real and relevant. So our current unemployment rate for Tennessee, we can scroll down and see that we are at, there we are, 3.5%. Okay? But then we're going to come back up here because the kids are going to say, well, that's fine that Tennessee, but what is it in my community, in my county? And so when you click on this tab that says counties, you can then come over here and actually look at, we'll scroll down and find Tennessee and tell it to draw the map. Okay. And remember, this is July 2018 because when we are looking at our data, we're always looking in that rear view mirror in our car, right? Because we're looking back at what's happened, but we use it to help to try to figure out what's going to happen in the future. So let's make this map a little bigger. And we can see our rates that are over here. Somebody interpret the data for me. Interpret the map. What do you notice?
The interstates, always the hubs of the interstates have the better. You've got Knoxville area because of the 2 interstates. Okay. You've got 3 interstates in Nashville, and you've got the 1, maybe 2, but one that goes through Memphis and then leads on out west.
Okay. Okay, so you can see, so interstates, what happens, usually when we have those dissecting things, they're going through what we call a metropolitan statistical area. So, yeah, so Nashville and the counties that surround it are what we call the Nashville MSA. So we look at that in terms of economic activity from there. And so when we look here, so this is Williamson, Davidson, and Rutherford. Generally we say the center of the MSA is the donut. Okay, and what you see from there is when you go out from the donut, for every loop you go out, you'll see that unemployment generally gets higher the further away you get from the center of the donut. Okay, so we can see that. So that's one interpretation, that our MSAs and kind of where those interstates are going. What else? What other interpretations can you have of this?
Probably per, I don't know if you say per capita or how you say it, but I would say probably the Williamson County is a dominant college level residential more than and less of the other. And you can tell that, look at their rate.
So you could look at, in terms of education is what you're thinking about. So you can't pull that directly from this, but you could say, oh, maybe there's a correlation between this, and we could look at other data and information to help us interpret that further. Absolutely. Okay. What else? Which areas do you see higher unemployment in?
Out in the middle of nowhere. In the west, it's more agriculture.
We see generally our rural areas have higher rates of unemployment, less opportunities there in many cases, and it tends to be that we see in a lot of times in West Tennessee as well for our state, that we tend to see that there as well. Okay, all right. So again, this was July 2018. The highest rate, we'll look here, let's see who is this. This is Weakley County 7.6 that we have there. Who's over here? Hancock 6.5, and let's come back over here. McNary 6.4. Now, let's go to July 2008. What was happening in July 2008?
That was the recession time.
In the middle of the recession, right? Let's look at this map for the middle of the recession.
So, oh no, I'm just going past you. Just a reminder, if you're going to show this in your class, because I have to ask Jackie every time, you have to hit the draw map button. Otherwise, you're just sitting there going, why did that not work?
Yeah, it won't automatically do it for you, so you have to do that there. Okay. So now, interpret this map for me. I heard you all were aghast. Okay.
Now I can notice that Wilson County has stepped up one, but teaching at the adult high school, I moved here in 2008, and we were getting tons of older men in their 40s, mid-40s that had families and they didn't have a high school diploma, and they were the first to get dropped. and that was horrifying. And I also noticed that I went and bought a home in fall of '09, and I got the best deal. It was a buyer's market because no one could sell the homes. And so there were lots of jobs, buyer's market for homes, and a lot of construction they were going to do was stalled.
Yeah. And remember, when we're looking at the economy, when we look at unemployment, this is just one, I always say, one little snapshot. You have to look at all these other things that you're mentioning. The donut effect, you can really see it here, can't you? Yeah. Okay, so what else? So we're looking at this, let's look about high rates of unemployment. Where are you seeing that at again?
Oh, still the West.
Okay, some of the West tend to be higher shades. Let's talk about Perry County. This particular month, 19.9. That's the reported rate of unemployment. Their actual rate of unemployment, when we look at U6, so that bigger measure of unemployment, was probably closer to 35 to 40%.
What's the one to the west of Davison that's the same shade? What is that one, Cheatham?
Cheatham.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so, but in Perry County, also remember, smaller population. Primarily what happened there is they had a large manufacturer who closed, and they were a big employer for that particular county. So huge impact that they had for them as well. Okay, but really interesting information that we have there that you can kind of see and compare and contrast where we were, where we are now. Okay. Maria, anything else to add about this particular map?
No, just it's important when we talk about economic growth as a whole that, you know, the next part of that conversation with your students is how do you protect yourself from that? You know, we've seen the Great Depression, we've seen the Great Recession. What sort of things, because you are still receiving an education, what sort of things can you do to kind of help insulate yourself against this kind of unemployment? And I'll tell you, my first answer to that to my students is to learn to compete on a global basis. The big thing now is teaching online. Have you all seen that? China is hiring thousands of teachers to teach English online. All you need is a computer and a screen and a mic. And so students now can do accounting for the other side of the world in the middle of the night. You don't have to count on the local manufacturer. And it's particularly hard when you're in those rural areas and they shut down the only business you've known. If you lived in Scott County when the blue jean factory went to Mexico, all those people got laid off. And literally, it's one thing to retool when you're 30, but it's another thing to retool when you're 61. You're 5 years from Medicare. You're 5 years from being able to draw out your Social Security with any sort of, full level. So what are you going to do? So with students, it's how many times do you need to retool, and do you need to be prepared to retool to kind of insulate yourself against that sort of thing?
Okay. And remember, we're talking about this from an economic perspective right now. And so the numbers that we're looking at here, remember, Great Recession, we disaggregated and drilled down a little bit further so we could look at those counties. So even during the Great Depression, when we said, oh, unemployment was at 25%, if we were looking at specific counties in some of those rural Dust Bowl areas, their unemployment clearly would have been much higher, right? So as we think about that.
How far back do the dates go for this?
I can't remember, but let's look. Let's see, 2008, we can go back to 1990. So it doesn't go as far back, but it still goes decently far back, right? Yeah. Okay. And remember, if you're using this in your classroom, think about it in terms of how the impact is. So you're using a primary source data, because it comes from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, how you are doing ACT prep with this kind of thing, because you're looking at and analyzing charts and data, and how that ties into some of those things that you'll be doing in your classroom, okay?
Also on that website, there is data, unemployment data back to the 1930s, 20s, and 30s. It's just not in this handy-dandy map format.
Yeah. We like the map. It's cool looking and it's great. And then you've got the down below. You can always, if you're a business teacher, we always like to use this because you can cut it and paste it into Excel, and that way you're manipulating real data. You can sort it and do different things with it. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? All right, well, let's take a 15-minute break. Or actually, do you want to do ESP real quick on this part? And then we'll take your break. So ESP quickly.
Okay, yes, so ESP quickly. And we really want to think about this, thinking about going back to our causes of the Great Depression. So we talked a lot about unemployment. So for this one, let's think about unemployment and the economic, social, and political ramifications of unemployment during the Depression. And you'll get your 3.
Fear, panic.
purchasing for development.